We good to go? All right. We will call to order the City of Desert Hot Springs regular meeting of the City Council. The City Council serving as the successor agency to their former redevelopment agency board for Tuesday, October 20th, 2020. This is our 6 p.m. regular session. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Betts.
Present.
Councilmember Gardner.
Present.
Councilmember Pye.
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Griffith.
Present.
And Mayor Mattis.
Present. Tonight we have Elder John Tinker from the Word of Life Church to give our invocation, and then we'll have Mr. Betts lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Tinker, are you there?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
We can, perfectly. It's all yours.
All right. Well, it's an honor to be here. Thank you, and I won't be before you long. Lord God, you could bow your head if you like. Lord God, we come to you tonight, and we thank you for this time. And we ask that you bless this meeting. And we ask that you bless our mayor and city council and awesome city staff. We ask that you give them godly wisdom and strength to do the things that need to be done. And we just ask that you give them a great favor. And we pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Go Dodgers.
Amen, sir. Thank you very much. I threw that into our nightly prayer at my table last night, and my kids all laughed and then said you shouldn't do that. But thank you, John, for supporting that. Pledge of Allegiance tonight will be given by Councilmember Betts. All right. Our next item will be the city attorney's report on closed session.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Members of council, there's no reportable action.
Tonight's agenda is before you. Is there anybody like to pull anything from the consent calendar? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar in whole and the agenda. Looks like a motion by Mr. Gardner. Is there a second? There is a second on the screen. Please vote. I'm sorry, did we have any comments on consent calendar?
No.
Thank you.
Councilmember Gardner. Okay, motion passes unanimously.
Thank you very much. Move on to public comments. At this time, pursuant to the Brown Act, any persons may comment on matters of general interest within the subject matter jurisdiction of the City Council not listed on the agenda. Under the Brown Act, the City Council shall not take action on or discuss matters raised during public comment portion of the agenda that are not listed on the agenda. Speakers may, all comments are to be directed to the City Council and shall be devoid of any personal attacks. Members of the public are expected to maintain professional, courteous decorum during public comments. Do we have any public comments tonight?
Yes, we have one, Brad Anderson.
Mr. Anderson, are you there?
Yes, good evening. This is Brad Anderson. I live in the city of Rancho Mirage, and I'll keep it brief tonight. I just wanted to emphasize, well, anyway, as you're aware, you have a trustee that you appoint to the Coachella Valley Cemetery District. Coachella Valley Vector Control District. Man, I'm lost tonight. Sorry about that. And they both had meetings on the same day, so that's why I have. But anyway, I wanted to emphasize that last year and the year prior, I believe, that the district, that special district, that small special district, has raised assessment on people's property taxes. They have done that for years now. And because I got my tax bill yesterday, and of course, it's noticeably higher. And I know for a fact that we're not getting our money's worth out of that district. But again, I want to emphasize that one of your council members voted to increase that fee, and has done that in the past too. So I just want to, I guess, just really just say that taxes, increasing taxes this time when people are out of work, unemployed, for whatever reason, we know the reason, it's inexcusable. We know government officials are still receiving their pay along with bonuses and pay increases, and that goes with the city councilor and allowances like car allowances like you guys received not that long ago. So I want to, I guess, maybe, and we have elections coming up, so I would hope that people will look at everything when they go to place the ballot in the mailbox, or at least fill it out. and consider those aspects, and consider if you're better off now than you were, a year ago. And that's all I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments. Is that our final public comment?
Yes, it is.
Thank you very much. Move the city manager's report. Mr. City Manager, I know I didn't get a chance to let you say a few words during our presentations, but it's all yours at this point.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to obviously say a few extra words about Roberta tonight, but I think what I'm going to do is call her on the phone tomorrow and express my gratitude for all she's done. I do have a couple of reports this evening, one of them being from our finance director, our weekly finance report. Jeffrey, are you available?
Oh, yes, thank you. Good evening, Mayor and council members. So our updated financial report. So as of October 19th, 2020 for fiscal year 2021, the general fund and public safety revenues are at $2,551,358, which is 11% of the 2021 budget. At this time last year, revenues were about 2.3 million, and we're at 10% of the fiscal year 1920 budget. Our expenditures are at $7,104,871, which is 28% of the 2021 budget. At this time last year, the expenditures were at 24% of the 1920 budget. The expenditures for this year are higher at this time due to changes in the transfers from the general fund to the health and wellness, debt service, and citywide lighting and landscaping maintenance funds. Previously, those transfers took place semi-annually. Now they are occurring on a quarterly basis to avoid negative cash balances in those funds. Some of the major revenues that have been received by the city to date. As of October 19th, the transient occupancy tax, we've received $304,000, which is 15% of the budget. Last year at this time, we received 17%. We've received $467,000 in the dispensary tax, which is over 28%. Last year at this time, we received only 20%. We've received $130,000 in sales tax, which is 7% of the budget. This revenue source is collected, has a lag time on a quarterly basis, so we really don't get updates until quarterly basis. Business license, we've received over $53,000, which is 23% of the budget. Building permits, we received over $210,000, which is 26% of the budget. Planning fees, we received over $125,000, which is at 31% of the budget. Engineering fees, we've received at $86,000, which is 25% of the budget. And the utility users tax, we've received over $366,000, at 19% of the budget. Within the next week, we expect to receive a large utility users tax from SCE. They usually pay this about this time, this week or around this week. Our expenditure for the categories for expenditure for this fiscal year, the city has spent over $4.7 million in personal services, which is 39% of the budget. The reason why it's higher than the actual percentage, close to 33, is that some of these larger expenditures, such as general liability insurance, workers' comp insurance, and the PERS side fund payments are made earlier in the fiscal year. So those are significant expenses that we have to make in July and September. So our operating expenses are at $417,000, which is only 13% of the budget, and contract services are at almost $1.1 million, but it's at 15, which is only 15% of the annual budget for the general fund and the public safety fund. I will be sending this memo out to the council members after this meeting or tomorrow morning for you to review it. And that is the end of my report.
Thank you, Jeffrey. I appreciate it. Danny, would you give us an update on CIP projects, please?
Thank you very much. Just have a couple of updates. The first one is the 8th Street Storm Drain Project. The 8th Street Storm Drain Project, majority of the asphalt is complete, majority of the striping is complete, and majority of the asphalt berms are complete. The contractor is working on final punch list items, which include one major asphalt repair on Palm and 8th Street and minor cleanup items along the entire project site, which include cleaning the striping, removing debris from all the catch basins, and backfilling all the asphalt burns as well. We expect that final punches item to be completed on the week of November 16th. The Palm Drive projects, the only item remaining was the streetlights. Those streetlights have been installed. There are about 7 jog walks, which is the concrete around for ADA that's still being completed, but we do expect the streetlights to be completed within the next 2 to 3 weeks. SCE is finalizing all the energizing for those streetlights. So we'll have brand new streetlights that will be turned on from Two Bunch to Pearson Boulevard. And the last update is parks. We have the park lights are currently off. They have been off for about a couple of weeks already. The reason they're off is because we have been overseeding and we wanted to make sure that the seeds germinate. Mission Springs Park will be turned on this Sunday, and the other parks will be turned on between this Sunday and the beginning of November to make sure that the seeds actually germinate. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Danny. Mr. Mayor, that's all we have.
We have questions by Mr. Betts for Public Works.
First, the intersection at West and 8th is perfect. And so is the intersection at Palm and 8th. Great job on that project there. The manhole cover that sticks up, is that getting addressed by Mission Springs Water District?
It is, and it's actually, the lid says GTE, so we're confirming which utility it is, and they will be adjusting it. I know what you're talking about. Yeah, the one on the east side, right? Yeah.
And then I had some residents talking about you go up Palm and turn right on 8th, the section from 8th to, would it be Mesquite? Is there an issue there with maybe it's a little bumpier than it should be?
There's one issue right on that intersection. Yes, they already redid it once, and I believe they're going to come back and fix that again.
So just in case anybody's watching, we're on.
They are fixing it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
And then on the parks, I noticed we've had problems in years past where we weren't able to go in and actually do everything we wanted to do on these parks because they were being so heavily used.
Correct.
Now you've actually in there, I noticed the crews are out there putting sand, filling up the holes. And so these things are going to look pretty darn nice when they're done, right?
Yeah, this year we actually added almost 3 inches of sand to the lower areas of the soccer field, which we weren't able to do before just because we needed a lot of time to actually stick to the actual ground. So yeah, we did do a lot more work this year than the year before. So we took advantage of the closures that we could do farther longer this year than the years before. We still added an extra fertilizer so we can open it as soon as possible. It does take a few weeks to do it.
Okay, good. So if anybody sees the grass looks really brown right now, that's what it's supposed to look like because everything's germinating, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, great. Thanks. I just wanted to clarify those points.
Since you're there, Mr. Forrest, the Rancho Del Oro project, I know the residents were notified recently that landscaping project is going to begin. Do you have details on that? Yeah, we do have the phase 1 project, which includes some block wall repairs. The irrigation, removal of the existing old irrigation with brand new irrigation is also going to be taking place, and the removal of some landscaping as well. I believe it's a 3-week project and it should begin, I think, next week, actually. So, great. So we'll see some action going on in all that landscaping in the next week or so. Right. Any Rancho Del Oro residents should receive notice, but anybody else that lives in and around that neighborhood, you'll see construction soon. So and if it affects your house directly, Nick, our public works manager, is actually handing out flyers directly to coordinate, make sure that you're aware. So somebody's in the backyard somewhere is because of us. Great, thank you. Mr. City Manager, anything else?
No, Mr. Mayor, that'll be it.
Thank you very much. Move on to mayor and council member comments. I'll start now at this end today. Mr. Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wanted to address one thing that came up during public comments a moment ago regarding mosquito vector control district. I am the city's trustee on that board. Just to clarify what Mr. Anderson was alluding to, your monthly property tax bill went up $1.01 this year. That's a rather significant increase, don't you think? $1.01 went from $13.48 to $14.39 per year. What you get for that $14.39 is an $11.5 million total revenue stream that controls mosquito-borne diseases to keep people safe and healthy throughout the valley. And it's not something we take lightly. $1.01 is exceedingly minimal considering the growth in this valley and the number of mosquitoes that have invaded, particularly the Aedes aegypti ones that are coming out of that are foreign invasion ones that have been transplanted here from elsewhere and live around the Salton Sea and create rather havoc for people living down there. We're lucky out here in Desert Hot Springs that given the wind and the lack of water, we don't have a tremendous influx of mosquitoes out here, but down valley they certainly do, and it keeps all of us healthy. So wanted to clarify that. Wanted to give kudos to the Riverside County Assessor's Office for their ballot drop-off location here at City Hall. They have great staff people there that are very good about double checking to see if you've signed your ballot, answering questions and things like that, handing out water, keeping everybody happy and safe. And I'm really glad to see so many people voting and voting early. As of today in the county, 1.2 million ballots were sent out and 152,000 of them have been returned. That's double the rate at the same time from last year. I dropped mine off last Thursday. I got an email yesterday that I had been verified and it was ready for counting. And you can track your ballot. Great website, real easy to remember. where'smyballot.ca.gov. where'smyballot.ca.gov. And the registrar said that because of the volume, it's taking 3 to 4 business days to verify and sort the ballots as they come in. So if you drop it off here at City Hall, don't worry if yours is still showing it's not been returned or verified after a couple of days. However, if you have not received one yet, they did say that everything has been mailed out, and if you call them, you can have a replacement one sent out. I've heard from many, as have some of my colleagues up here, about concerns with mail delivery, especially up in the northwest part of town. Everything from very late to missing deliveries on a regular basis, and it is very frustrating, especially with the election so close. As a city, we're not in a position to do much except make the post office and our federal elected officials and the media aware of the issues, and along with them put pressure on the post office, which is what we're doing to ensure that resources and personnel to process and deliver the mail in a timely manner. That being said, I'd certainly encourage everybody to use the official drop box here that Riverside County has set up outside of City Hall. They're open from 10 to 3 every weekday between now and the election in 2 weeks. In addition, there'll be voter assistance centers at Mission Springs Water District and at our senior center that'll be open starting Saturday the 31st until Election Day, Tuesday, November 3rd. You can certainly mail it back. I'm not saying don't use the mail if that's the preferred method you want to use, but if you really want some peace of mind, the official county drop box is the best way to go, and it's in our nice little new amphitheater here at City Hall behind the Cabot Yerxa statue. And you can always have a family member or a trusted friend drop it off for you too. You'll need to note that they have permission to do that on the return envelope, and they'll need to sign it too. And just a word of warning, don't give your ballot to strangers or someone you don't know to drop off. It's going to be a long count, I think, but I'm really happy to see the number of people voting and how smooth it's been going here at City Hall. I didn't have any external meetings between now and our last meeting, so I have nothing else to report on, and I'll turn the time back to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Betts.
No, wasn't expecting so early. Thanks.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to go back and forth this time.
Good.
Trying to mix it up.
All right, good. I had a couple of comments from a request from the public who generally like to participate in the public comment section of the meetings, that they're having difficulty getting connected with the Zoom. And I thought maybe at some point in time, something we could do to make accommodation in this room for people to use the podium. And I understand we just went to the purple tier, but there's some people that just were looking for a better way to make public comment than what we're able to provide. Zoom is working out really well for a lot of us that have remote meetings. I mean, not everything is bad about it, but I think so if their staff could work on coming up with some sort of a plan to where we could be safe, but still accommodate the public. I know at some of the other meetings I'm at, in the county supervisor chambers, that they do allow the public comment at the podium. I don't know if I want to bring this subject up, but man, the property tax bills hit, and whether it's $1 more a month, and I appreciate your comments, Mr. Gardner. Was, well said. That's only $1, but man, everything is just adding up. People are getting bills, and if you look at your Prop 13 section of your bill, it's maybe $2,000, and by the time all the other fees are piled on, it's going up to $4,500 and more. And over the last 5 years, for example, Mission Springs Water District bill went from $300 to now it's $649, say $650 a year. And it's just really piling it on. And people who don't get their tax bill directly, who just get it through their escrow company, are all of a sudden notified, hey, your taxes went up, you need to put some more money in. And it's starting to hit home. When you go from $2,000 to $4,500 with all the other fees, and I know the city has a couple of measures on there that were voter approved, but we also have Desert Valley Disposal that we put on the tax rolls. Mission Springs Water District put the sewer on the tax rolls. So at some point in time, there's got to be some pushback on this, because at the end of the day, you got homeowners who are having these tax bills to pay, and elderly or whoever else who are faced with getting taxed out of their home. And it's a problem. And especially when the tax bills hit, you hear about it. If the county had a policy where the only thing you're responsible for is the Prop 13, if you get behind on your taxes, and then everything else, well, you just have to catch up on as you can, that might be another story. But anyhow, so that's something that maybe the council would take a look at in the future to see if there's something maybe we can do to alleviate that burden. Maybe tell DVD they got to start doing their own billings or something along those lines. Also had some comments come in regarding Desert Community Energy, and somebody asking when can they participate here in the city. And I started looking at that. I said, well, we're not a member of Desert Community Energy, but I went to look at their agenda, and it showed it had us listed as a member, but that's the energy choice between Palm Springs, Cathedral City, and Palm Desert. So sure enough, I look at the agenda, and it showed us as member non-voting. And I don't know how the heck that happened, but I called down and talked to CVAG and the people involved with Desert Community Energy. And at their last meeting, there was an oversight on their part. At some point in time, way back when, somebody said we wanted to be a member, so they put us on without any council direction. So that's corrected. So that's good news. Speeding, a lot of complaints on speeding, and they're running up Palm Drive. You know, they got to be doing 15, 20 miles an hour over the speed limit. And I happen to be sitting out there today just watching them go by, and something's got to be done. We need to do more than what we're doing. And then, of course, you've got residents asking for the speed humps, not the speed bumps, but the speed bumps in the residential streets. I know they cost money, but we've had continual requests for those. And you drive through Palm Springs, and they make extensive use of those in areas where they've had problems, to the point where they have 2 or 3 or 4 of them on one boulevard. Was it Escuela? One of those streets right down there off of Gene Autry. So I really would like to see if staff could figure out a way to figure out where these residential speeding problem areas are, and come back to the council with some kind of proposal that, you know, we could consider for funding to see if we can maybe knock this down a little bit. And then we have a motorcycle cop, and if, I don't know who in staff could tell me what hours they're patrolling and what they're doing. I'd sure like to see, you know, if we're out there, maybe what can we do more? Anyhow, I'll just leave it at the speeding on Palm Drive is excessive. It's way beyond just normal speeding. It's really fast. And then the new trend seems to be running stop signs altogether, just not even stopping at them. And so please be careful when you pull up to a stop sign. Don't assume it's you've got the right of way, aren't going to get hit. Now, last thing was I got a call from some residents who were concerned about a lot that was on Desert View and Cactus. And this is the value of people who are involved and taking a look at their community and caring enough to speak up. All of us here watch the community, I think, continually, and staff, they're busy all the time, but they've got stuff to do, but they can't watch it like the public does. So we got these calls about this lot on Desert View that was a mess. It had a car that was a relatively new car. I think it had new plates that was abandoned. And there was trash everywhere. So I decided to go down and look. And so I walk up, and there's this woman sitting in a chair, and I kind of jokingly said, "What are you doing? You can't have all this trash all over. You got to pick this up." You know, she kind of took me seriously, and I said, no, I calmed her down a little bit and explained to her I'm just there kind of joking with my bad humor. And so anyway, I got to talking, and she's very nice. Name's Tammy, very well dressed, just down on her luck. So I gave her my card and said, you know, give me a call. And she said, well, the problem here is we've got 2 trash cans, but they're full. And DVD went by, the trash company went by and didn't pick them up. And well, they didn't pick them up because it's not a service address. The people who were there living in this homeless camp went and grabbed some trash cans for the neighbors and started using them. Anyhow, we got DVD to go pick up those trash cans. So I got a call from Tammy the next day. He says, hi, I couldn't stay there any longer, but I did pick up some of the trash along the front. I was just joking, but anyhow, she was concerned enough about it. And then she said, I'm down here at Well of the Desert, and I'm trying to get some help. I was wondering if you could talk to him. So I picked up the phone and talked to her, talked to Arlene, who's down there, I forget her last name, and see if we could get her some help. And so it ended up that this person here who is really quite articulate is ended up going to get hired on by Well of the Desert to help them solicit donations. And then the next question was, well, she has nowhere to stay. So I worked out with them to get her a couple of nights at a hotel. Then I got in touch with Tom at CVAG on the homeless program there. And not to go too much longer on this, but she's got housing until the 1st, and then they're going to try and work on more. But the situation here is there's some people out there that are just down on their luck. They're very bright and they need some help. But looking at the amount of effort it takes to just deal with one person and get them hopefully on a path that's going to get their life back to normal, and then seeing all the people out there, we got a huge mission on our hands. And we're working through CVAG. They're hiring a new director down there. They got away from Path of Life. And Janet, I mean, to be, jumping on, your deal down there. You're doing a great job there on the homeless. And I've just happened to touch base with here locally. And we just as a council need to really look at this problem and figure out who we can help and how we can help them. We've got, there's just big issues out there. The only other couple items I haven't gone on too long is had a request from people for flashing stop signs on Little Morongo at Pearson and Indian at Pearson, and put in that request to city managers. City managers on it. The initial quote came in, significant cost. Everything that you try and do on the roads is significant cost. So they're going to look at that, try and figure out how they can do it. But that is getting worked on. And then we had a couple of the blue boxes, the blue donation boxes show up at some of the properties, Rite Aid and Stater Brothers, and both of those managers said they don't want those there. Can we do something to get those taken care of? Mr. Mayor, I think I probably went on too long, but anyhow, we're in purple tier now, which is presenting all kinds of challenges to the community and the council, and I think we're working on that to do what we can. I know the mayor and staff has been in close contact with the county to make sure that we deal with this effectively. So that's all I got. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Ms. Pye.
I got, what do I want to call it? Zoom fatigue. Attending the League of California Cities from the 7th through the 9th, from 9 a.m. to about 5. But there was a lot of good information that occurred. And for those of you who did not attend, I have some information for you. Like on hiking trails, I have information for you. This was the first time that I was a delegate. And I'd like to suggest that going forward, that the council look at the agendas for the delegates. There was only one agenda, one resolution, and that was that the League calls upon the U.S. Congress to amend Section 230 of the Communication Decency Act of 1996 to condition immunity from civil liability on the following. And it talks about online platforms and implementing reasonable program to identify and take down content which solicits its criminal activity. An online platform must provide to law enforcement information which will assist in the identification and apprehension of persons who use the services of the platform to which a person is engaged in criminal activity. And the last, an online platform that willfully or negligently fails to either of these duties is not immune from enforcement of state and local laws, which impose criminal or civil liability. I don't know what all of the resolutions are about going forward, but I think that whoever is delegate should make sure that the council reads them. Not all councils look at the resolution or know what the resolutions are. So that's not normal procedure. Some of them they did, and they told them how to vote. For this one measure, it took an hour and a half to go through this. Didn't think it was that necessary, but it was approved as yes with 56% of the vote, which was 122 persons. No was 39% of the vote with 85 persons. Councilmember Betts and I attended the Mission Springs Water District meeting, study session. And I also attended their regular meeting, and the Planning Commission can look forward to the Mission Springs, I hope I say it right, Mission Springs Water District Regional Reclamation Center, which is actually a treatment plan. And it's coming to the Planning Commission regarding the parcels that it will be taking up. And the last thing I want to talk about, and I'm stressing what you referred to, and that is people need to vote. Some people say that my vote doesn't count. My last election, I won by 28 votes. It makes a difference. It makes a difference federally, it makes a difference in the state, and it makes a difference in the local level. And if you don't vote, you have nothing to complain about. So please vote. I'm done.
Thank you. Mr. Griffith.
Like Councilmember Gardner, I did not have any outside meetings to attend. However, I did get a chance to tour a new resort and spa with Denise Hammett, our economic development manager. And it's reassuring to me that we have businesses that, despite the pandemic, are still willing to take a chance and open. They opened September 7th. They bought this derelict property, been empty for 10 years, spent quite a bit of money fixing it up. It's still a work in progress, but it's called Mikasa Hot Springs. And it is a all-male resort. They just, like I said, they just opened, and I want to welcome them to the community. And I'm real happy that we have these kind of endeavors going on. I know we also had a chiropractor office just open also. But for me, being in the hospitality industry, I'm wanting to see our spas get revived. It's reassuring to me that that actually can be something that can be done. Can we do something with the echo?
I was just going to say, if anybody's got any mobile devices that have a mic going, if you mute your mic, that might help. It's a guess, but I'm not sure. This just has never happened yet, so.
Ghost in the machine. And the other thing I want to make an announcement about is that because this will be our last meeting for about a month, the 16th annual Coachella Valley Economic Partnership Annual Summit will be upcoming. It will be November 19th. Like many things now, it will be virtual. It is free to attend. It will be streaming live on KESQ, I believe on their website. And the theme this year is called Becoming Essential. And what they will showcase is the annual economic report and forecast, showcasing our region's business attractions and goals to mobilize a long-term strategy to diversify our businesses, business sectors, as well as elevate the economy of Greater Palm Springs through business diversification. So if you get a chance, they have a speaker, and his name is, let me bring my glasses. is Manfred Kyle, and I heard him speak last year. Some people think he's the most boring part of the event. I myself found him to be really fascinating because he's all about facts and figures, which I love. So if you want really good information, I really urge you to attend. It'll be very interesting and informative. And that's all I have.
Thank you very much. I'll try to get through my comments pretty quick. I attended the ERICA meeting, which is a JPA that we sit on for our radio system. There's going to be a lot more information coming about that, but we had a presentation by the county system, which is called PSEC, and the possible joint efforts on joining that system. And we'll be talking more about that in the future. Attended a Riverside County Transportation meeting. There was nothing really pertaining to the city of Desert Hot Springs in there. Still be careful along the west end of the county, as there's still multiple highways and freeways that are under construction, especially the 60, which is the closest to us. You can always go to rctc.org and look at the latest updates on exactly what's going on in those areas. I was asked to join the Greater Coachella Valley Chamber of Commerce Board of Directors to hand out awards. What they usually do is they have a State of the City that they host, and then they hand out awards to local businesses. And so my award this year from the mayor's seat was Candescent. I gave them the mayor's award this year due to their efforts on employing residents of Desert Hot Springs and Coachella Valley residents. Over 250 jobs they have employed here in Desert Hot Springs, and the multiple revenues of tax streams that they bring in. So that was my awardee this year. This will be on Facebook on the Coachella Valley Chamber of Commerce, along with my State of the City, if you haven't seen it. And those awards by the Chamber of Commerce will be presented. I think Food Now got nonprofits. Volunteer of the Year was Team Mom, Margaret Webb. Playoffs was small business, large business was Royal Emerald Pharmaceuticals. So I think I got everybody there. Food drive, I want to again thank the Sikh community for coming out. We've had 2 different temples come to our community and give food. First, the Shandi group, and they came in not long after the pandemic has started. And then most recently, the Riverside chapter has come into our community, and I wanted to thank them again. This last Sunday was the second event, and it went over so well that they want to put on another event this Sunday, and you can find the information on the city website, my Facebook. I'm sure a lot of the council members will share the information that was put out late today on their Facebooks. Again, I think this last Sunday, Dory, our assistant city manager, and her kids were there. Councilmember Betts was there. Multiple Rotarians in our community were there, and some other volunteers. And we started a little after 8. The forklift showed up a little late, and we were done handing out over 400 boxes by about 9:45. So it goes quick. But if you're in food need, please feel free to show up. The line usually starts lining up between 7 and 7:30, but you don't have to wait in that long line. You come anytime between 7 and 9 o'clock, and most likely be guaranteed a box of food, but it is first come, first serve. And this will be the last event for them this quarter. And possibly more events after the first of the year, but for right now, this is what they have a contract with for the food. The boxes do contain vegetables, fruits, and a gallon of milk. I attended the CVAG, which is the Coachella Valley Association of Governments executive meeting and joint transportation meeting. I am the chair of the transportation this year, so I helped chair the meeting. We had multiple items, and they do this every once in a while when there's a major item on the agenda, which was the CV Link. The CV Link had $52 million approved last night in construction in the Coachella Valley. You'll see some major construction going on over the next 5 years throughout the Coachella Valley, from Palm Springs all the way to Coachella. Unfortunately, Desert Hot Springs is not in the CV Link yet. If the council chooses in the future to join that, that'll be a decision they make, probably under some grant funding. But the cities of Ranch Mirage and Indian Wells are not participating in the CV Link, but the rest of the Coachella Valley is. There'll be 2 trails spearing off in Palm Springs and going into one trail, which is there's a piece of it already built in Palm Springs. Castillo City will join that and go through the Coachella Valley from there. I have my biweekly meeting with the food and faith-based organizations. Community One, which is Maria Lopez, she's working out of the Methodist Church, started her nonprofit, is helping organize a matrix on who's giving food when and where and how. She's also meeting with all the faith-based organizations on volunteering in the future. Food Now is in very much need for volunteers. A lot of their volunteers are seasonal residents of Desert Hot Springs. And without a lot of our seasonal residents coming back because of COVID, they're in need of volunteers. To volunteer, you can go to foodnow.org, I believe. If you just Google Food Now, you can go there, go to the website and print off a volunteer application. You do have to fill that out and get approved to be a volunteer, but they're in much need of volunteers. They give away food two times a week, and it's not an easy task. As Mr. Betts and I found out, handing boxes and just putting them, which were already pre-packed, carrying them about 10 feet to a car at the most, it worked us out pretty well. But this is a Food Now drive every week. They're feeding over 450 families right now because of COVID, and they're in much need of volunteers. So if you know of anybody that wants to volunteer some time, please, again, go to their website and fill out the volunteer application or call Dana. I forget Dana's last name all of a sudden. Johnson, thank you. It was such a hard name to remember. It's like Cernick, Johnson Cernick. It's so hard to remember. Dana Johnson, he's the executive director there, and he can guide you through the process if you're not very savvy with the computer. Again, as mentioned by council members and by our staff, we are back in purple tier. Please look at the restrictions. They're online on the city website. And the one good thing is that they're modified some businesses, so they're not all have to be closed. This is a joint effort from all members of Riverside County to get tested. We are just about a little over a point. No, we were 2 points over where we were supposed to be out on a positivity rate, which caused us back into the purple tier, but we are down on the hospital rate, which is good. But we have to be under these numbers to get out of the purple tier. We're in purple tier for 3 weeks starting today. And then we'll hopefully get back to the red tier and move forth on that. If you have questions about where to get tested, the Lozano Center, which is at Tedesco Park, is still doing free testing, and it's still, you don't even have to have an appointment anymore. You just walk in and you get tested. So the more tests we get, the better. All the stuff about the ballots have been talked about. If you have any questions, our city clerk's office can be reached. Again, we'll have 2 sites open on the 31st. These are help centers, they're being called, correct?
Vote centers.
Vote centers.
Voter assistance centers.
Voter assistance centers. And they'll be open, one at the 2nd Street, on 2nd Street at the Mission Springs Water District Annex building, and a senior center, which will be in the completely rear end of the senior center. So you'll go all the way to the parking lot, all the way to the back. And those 2 centers will be open starting October 31st, and they'll go through the election. And the times can be found on our website and or call the city clerk's office or the registrar's office for those. And then lastly, I just wanted to say that, it chokes you up a little bit, but longtime captain for the Desert Hot Springs Fire Station 37 at the age of 59 passed away of brain cancer this last week. His name was Pete Blakemore. He was my captain. He went too young. But he was diagnosed with brain cancer about 4 years ago, I believe it was. He fought through it. He had a lot of it removed. He was in remission for a little bit, but it came back and unfortunately took his life on October 12th. So with that said, keep his family in prayers. He spent a lot of time saving lives here in Desert Hot Springs. So with that said, we will move on to the administrative calendar. Item number 3 is the amendment to the professional services agreement with Urban Futures Incorporated for fiscal budgeting, cash flow analysis and projections, cost recovery and cost allocations methodology, and economic analysis. This will be Mr. Buckheim. Could you find a longer title for that, please, next time?
Right, thank you. I'll work on a longer title if you'd like, but I can't get wordy. Anyway, so Urban Futures has been working with the city for many years, assisting us with also fiscal budgeting and financial analysis, including especially the 10-year financial report that we bring to the council twice a year, also with economic analysis and economic development within the city, and other financial transactions like debt issuance
helping us to get the debt for building the city hall, most recent for refinancing the debt for the gas tax Measure A bonds, which is saving the city about $70,000 a year in debt service costs. So what we'd like to do is to be able to continue that relationship, and we're requesting to excuse me, extend the contract for another 3 years, or $225,000, about $75,000 a year. And we are currently budgeted in contract services in the finance department. I have Michael Bush online with Urban Futures to answer any questions.
Do we have any public comments on this?
No, we do not.
All right, move to council member comments. Anyone? Yes, Mr. Betts?
Yeah, hello, Michael, if you're out there. Good to have you with us and have had your services all these years. One thing that had come up in the past was scheduling regular reports to the council from Urban Futures, actually where they would be here. And I think we had requested that would be quarterly at a time when we were climbing out of the financial emergency. I don't know if that's necessary, but I'd sure like to see them at our meetings on a regular schedule of, at least twice a year to give the council an update on the, the budgeting, the cash flow projections, and generally his view of where we are. I mean, that's what the council is retaining him for. Those are the services that he provides. I just don't think we're hearing enough from him. I have tremendous confidence in his abilities, what he's done for the city in the past and is going to continue to do. I would just like to hear from him more often. So I'm hoping that we can include in this contract an addition that he will, by contract, show up twice a year to give the council some sort of an update, and not necessary for the quarterly. And then the other thing I take is, since this is a 3-year contract that has the usual caveat that if we decide to terminate, we can. We're just putting it for 3 years. It's not a hard and fast 3 years. This is, we can terminate at any time if we choose, correct?
All our contracts have that kind of out for us if we so choose.
So I probably don't need to ask that question anymore, right? Okay.
Well, it doesn't hurt to ask.
Okay. Well, you know what? I'm going to figure our staff's probably catching that one every time now, so I'll just let that go. So anyhow, if we could just make sure that we have twice a year reports from him, just a hi, here's a, that would be wonderful. I think that would fit perfectly.
Any other comments? Yes, Ms. Pye.
I have a question under physical impact, and I'm sorry I didn't ask this yesterday. It says that staff will include sufficient appropriation for the residual amounts for 22 and 23. What is that?
That will be, so right now that's the $225,000, whatever we spend for this year. If it's less than the 75,000, if it's 75,000, then it'll be $75,000 for each years for 21, 22, 22, 23. If it's less or more, then it'll be an even amount depending on whatever's left over from the contract.
That's not it.
Okay.
The physical impact. What is it? Where are you putting that in 22, 23?
So that will be part of contract services in the general fund for the finance department.
Okay. We have a 2-year budget.
Mm-hmm.
Is it in there?
For it's currently, we have a 1-year budget for 2021, and it is currently in there. For 21, 22, and 22, 23, if it improves, I've talked with the city manager, we go back to a 2-year budget. It'll be in the 2-year budget for 21, 22, 22, 23 for the residual amount of whatever remaining of the contract after this current fiscal year.
Jeffrey, the amount is in this year's budget is
75,000.
And then the amount in next year's budget will be probably
75,000.
And then the year after will also be 75,000.
I got it, but I'm still not getting the answer. Let me ask you another question. It's not to exceed $531,393.
Yes, so this is an amendment on the original contract. We started with 30,000 in 2017, extended another 3 years. And then now we're asking to extend it again for another, 3 years with an additional 225 for a total amount of all those years up to 500.
Got you. Okay.
Anyone else? All right, I entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion, please.
Go ahead.
Motion to approve the amendment to the professional services agreement with the Urban Futures as listed in the agenda and including 2 visits to brief the council on the state of the finances of the city each year.
Wait for it to come on the screen. Go ahead and press move. And I need a second. All right, it's been moved and seconded. Any more comments? Please vote.
The motion passes unanimously.
Thank you very much. Move to item number 4, which is a communications feasibility study, and this will be by our police chief, Jim Henson. Or our deputy chief.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. Thanks for having me here tonight and giving me the opportunity to go over the communications feasibility study. A lot of information here, but I'll try not to ramble too long. I know there's some sort of event going on with the Dodgers tonight that some folks would like to have a chance to catch up on, so we'll get you through that. Prior to January 2008, dispatch services were under the control of the Desert Hot Springs Police Department. Since 2008, dispatch services have been contracted out to Cathedral City. The attached communications feasibility study, which you all have received, was completed as a proposal to bring dispatch services back to the city of Desert Hot Springs. Since January 2008, as I said, these services have been contracted out to Cathedral City Police Department. Initially, this was a cost control decision. However, at this time, the city needs to look at the cost as well as the associated factors that come with contracting out dispatch services. The communications feasibility study points out the costs associated with establishing dispatch services back under the control of Desert Hot Springs Police Department. The first year's costs will be significantly higher due to startup costs, such as equipment. After 1 year, those costs will be less than the projected 2021 cost associated with dispatching contract out with Cathedral City. Other factors that need to be considered are the quality control will be brought back under the authority of City of Desert Hot Springs. This will allow the department to determine the best policies and goals for dispatch, direct control over citizen complaints, and make changes to policies much more efficient. Currently, the contract is subject to increases due to personal costs, pay increases, which we have no control over and which doesn't affect how many dispatchers are actually working at the dispatch center. In addition, a recent decision by Cathedral City to switch their CAD and RMS software caused the police department here at Desert Hot Springs to also make that switch. That cost was pushed on to us in an unforeseen cost. It should also be noted that there is no backup plan if Cathedral City was to discontinue dispatch service with the city. I do have a PowerPoint, which I'll go through to kind of give you some more information on that. As I indicated before, the factors that prompted this feasibility study, one of the big things is quality control. We don't have any control over the dispatchers at Cathedral City. I know we on the police department side, and I think probably all you on the council at some point have received a phone call from some constituent with some sort of complaint when they call the police department. And those calls are going to Cathedral City. Our requests are filtered through Cathedral City dispatch supervisors, but this causes delays and does convolute the process and a resolution to those issues. So having the service back in our hands will allow us to more efficiently control what goes on with the dispatchers. The core values may not always be reflected with Cathedral City as our core values. So again, it allows us to have that control with those employees. The financial control, as I mentioned before, the initial cost that starts, can we go to the next page here? And we'll go one more. Thanks, Cheryl. In the financial control, personnel pay scales, promotions, and raises are controlled by Cathedral City. We have no say in that. And per the contract, the annual payment is paid regardless of how many dispatchers are employed by Cathedral City. Again, I had mentioned the CAD and RMS system. Decisions which directly affect the day-to-day operations of the police department have been made without input from Desert Hot Springs. The Mark 43 RMS system, which is currently being implemented, is an example of that. Cathedral City decided to go to that new RMS system, which in turn forced us to have to go to that system, but our input was not asked prior to that. Next slide. Our current contract cost for dispatch services, there's an annual increase of 3.625% every September. This current contract that we are under, which started in 2018 and which will end in 2022, it started at 1.269 million. Currently, we are at 1.362 million. And then the final year would be 1.412 million. After September 2022, a new contract will have to be negotiated with Cathedral City if we choose to stay with them. Next slide. To give you an idea on the amount of calls that we're handling here at Desert Hot Springs. So at the top of the list, you see the total 911 calls. And I'll just go down to the 2019, it's 48,065. We run between 47,000 and we had a high of 61,000 calls per year. That's both Cathedral City and Desert Hot Springs put together. Desert Hot Springs by themselves, in 2019, we handled 35,941 calls. We did an additional 10,324 calls, which were self-initiated by the officers, and took 4,319 reports. And just to give you a little idea on the amount of calls that are coming into the service. Next slide. For the cost, overall, the initial cost for the equipment, that cost is $808,782.78. It's broken down, and this is also in your feasibility study, breaking down exactly where each of those costs come from. But that overall number there is strictly for the equipment that would go into making a dispatch center operational within the Desert Hot Springs. Next slide. For staffing, which was one of the issues we had when we had dispatch here within the police department, we used the NENA, which is a National Emergency Numbers Association. We use their workbook as a guide on staffing levels. One of the issues we had before when we had dispatch was if we didn't have a dispatcher available, we'd have to pull an officer out of the field. So we learned from that, and that's not what we want to do. We want to make sure that we fund this and bring in enough dispatchers that we can run fully operational 24/7 with dispatchers and not have to affect any patrol officers out in the field. So using the NENA worksheet that assisted us, we came up with our staffing would be 10 full-time dispatchers, 1 dispatch supervisor, and then 4 part-time dispatchers. Next slide. The scheduling is very similar to what our patrol officers are working. The dispatchers would work a 12-hour shift, and the dispatcher would work, a dispatch supervisor would work a 4-10 shift. And then we would have a 1 cover shift for a dispatcher that would work 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. And that's the busiest times when we're receiving calls. So that's why we put that person in that spot. Next slide. We looked at the salaries throughout the region. One of the things we looked at was going forward with this, we want to bring in qualified folks. Starting up a new dispatch center, it's not ideal to start with someone that does not have dispatch experience. So our goal is to bring in folks that have dispatch experience. We looked at the pay scales throughout the region. We came up with, and they ranged anywhere from about $22 up to $32 from a low to high for dispatchers. For dispatch supervisors, anywhere from $29 up to $39 for dispatch supervisor. We feel that we can be competitive and get the best qualified applicants to come to Desert Hot Springs with, and we go one more slide there, please. And the next one. And we would be looking at, for a dispatcher, they would start at $35.89, which again is at the high level, but again, it's bringing in those qualified applicants. A dispatch supervisor starting at $43.68, and the part-time dispatchers are a flat fee of $25 an hour. So on a yearly basis for costs for employee costs, fully staffed, we'd be looking at $1,074,370 for the dispatchers. That's a fully burdened rate. For a dispatch supervisor, $128,206. Again, a fully burdened rate. And the part-time dispatchers, 4 of them would work a total of 2,080 hours in 1 year, and that would be $52,000. That would bring us to a total of $1,254,576 for the employee cost for 1 year. Next slide. What do we need to do to get started with this? First thing we need is obviously your approval, but then our next step is a official request to become a public safety answering point. That request comes from the police department. It goes to the Governor's Office of Emergency Services, and it basically outlines our plans to open up basically a dispatch center. Lots of check the boxes and dot the I's and cross the T's that they want. But if we have that information that they want, we can justify based on the number of calls that we receive, the number of 911 calls that we receive, and our options throughout the region, that we would not have any problem receiving that go ahead from them. Next slide. Part of the cost of on equipment wise in starting a dispatch center is covered by the state. The state pays for the 911 phone system. This includes some equipment and software and installation. That cost is approximately $206,000. That is not in the numbers and that $808,000 that I mentioned before. So we left that portion out of it, as that is reimbursable by the state. And that's if we receive the approval to be a PSAP center. Obviously, if we went through this without that, we would not get that reimbursement for the state. So the goal is obviously to get that go ahead from the state. Next slide. Customer premise equipment provisions. Every 5 to 7 years, the state also provides funding for upgrading the system. This funding amount is calculated based on the number of 911 calls that we handle here at Desert Hot Spring. The state also provides money for training for the dispatchers and certain equipment that they need. Next slide. As I said, some additional benefits coming from the state on this is the money that is given for training, education materials, and certification for a PSAP system. Next slide. And the final slide, this shows the cost comparison chart for 2021 and 2022. Again, currently coming for 21-21, the contract with Cathedral City is for $1.412,199 million. As I mentioned before, we had the $808,000 for our equipment costs. And then we included 6 months of employee salaries in that. So for the first year, because we would still obviously have to use Cathedral City while we're building up our dispatch center, our cost would be $2,848,269. Going forward, 2022, that cost would go down to $1,341,000 and $1,341,727,000. So we see that cost savings in year 2 come immediately, and we would expect that to go years forward, obviously, because once we do in 2022, if we have to renegotiate with Cathedral City, there's nothing to indicate that they're going to give us a cheaper deal. We can expect at least that 3% plus increase each year going forward, starting at the 1.4 million. So again, I know that initial number can be a little frightening, but that gets us going, and then we can see some cost savings. At this point, what I would like to do is bring the finance director back up, because he can have some information on the financial part of it, and then I'll be available for questions With me here also is Gail Roberts, who's really our resident expert and subject matter expert on this and who wrote up the feasibility study. So we'll have the finance director come up first and give him your information.
Okay.
So I've come up with a recommendation for funding the dispatch center. The $808,000 for the equipment can actually be funded by the law enforcement and fire facilities DIF, the development impact fees. Those are available for the expansion of the police department and fire department and for properly for capital equipment. Currently, so of that 808,000, based on the number of calls and how many of them were sent over to CAL FIRE, I estimated about 12% were counted into CAL FIRE and the remainder were for law enforcement. So based on that allocation, I did it based on those percentages and allocation between the two different funds, which would come out to $711,729 to come from the law enforcement fund and $97,054 from the fire DIF fund. So this, and remember, this is just for the 808 capital costs. Currently the fire DIF fund has enough funding in there, has $729,000 in there to cover that. The law enforcement fund only has about $597,000. So what I'd recommend is having the $200,000 from the fire from the law enforcement DIF to go towards the equipment purchase, $200,000 to go towards the 9/11 purchase, the 9/11 system purchase, which will later be reimbursed, and then remaining $200,000 to stay in the fund for any future equipment or expansion purposes. By using that $200,000, what we'll need to do is there'll be $511,729 left, which we can do from an interfund loan from the general fund, and then have that paid back over. I recommend 5 years, which would make it about make an annual payment back to the general fund of over $51,000. Currently, on the average, law enforcement DIF receives $100,000 to $150,000 a year annually. Spend maybe $50,000 to $60,000 a year on equipment annually. So there is enough funding in there to make these payments back to the general fund. And then also the other part of the costs are the personnel costs. Those would have to be covered by general fund. They're not something that can be covered by DIF. And what we can use for those is we can use the general fund reserve for future operational and capital uses. It's that was from the policy, the comprehensive financial management policies adopted by council back in 2018. And this is something that we can use for that. Currently, that reserve balance is at over $1.2 million. So if we add this $627,000 plus the $511,000, it would be a total estimated amount of $1,139,017, of which $511 would be back. The other $627 would not. It would just have to be built back up during the normal period of building that reserve. So these costs, they're based on, there could be other savings depending on when we get the dispatchers online and when the contract actually ends with Cathedral City. And there's also potential, a small amount of revenue based on 911 calls coming in from the state that could also offset this. As you've seen before, between the contract and just the annual operating costs and the contract with Cathedral Cities, this could be a potential savings of $60,000 to $70,000 a year in ongoing operational costs.
Thank you very much. Is that it, Chief?
Thank you. So obviously at this point, what we're looking for is to authorize the city manager to begin the process of reestablishing dispatch services to the Desert Hot Springs Police Department. I'm available for any questions. Again, I said before, Gail Roberts, our resident expert and subject matter expert on this, is here if you have any questions for us.
And I actually would like to clarify something.
Please.
All right, I'd like to clarify something. So the The money for the phone system is setting of funds. We would never receive the setting of funds. Not the cash. They give us the amount that we're allotted to spend. The initial amount will cover the phone system. So we will not have to pay out of pocket for the phone system. It's all paid for by the state, everything that we need. In another 5 to 7 years, they will send the department, here is your allotted amount of money to spend to upgrade your phone system. That's what Setna is all about, is keeping your phone system up to date and the technology up to date. So they send you the amount of money. You choose your phone company, whether it's AT&T or Frontier. They've already went through the Setna system and have their set amount of money that they can charge you for things. You spend that money on your phone system, and if there's any residual amount of money in your funding, you can spend that for dispatch chairs or to upgrade your equipment or your furniture within the dispatch center. But the city will not be receiving those funds. So it's kind of like a grant. You get, here's your amount of money to spend. If you don't spend it, you don't get it. But it does keep your phone system upgraded to the latest equipment and the latest technology. So hopefully that clears that up, because I think there might have been a little bit confusion on how that works.
Thank you very much. Do we have any public comments on this item?
No, we do not.
All right. I wanted to first say thank you, Gail. You did a fantastic job on the feasibility study. Chief and our finance department, thank you for all your input on this and putting this together. And this isn't an easy, obviously, task for our city to have to try to get back into dispatching. But I think with all the comments and questions from our constituents in the last couple of years, it's probably the best way for us to go. And I'll start down here, Mr. Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Mary. I would echo what you said. I'm very impressed by both the feasibility study and the detailed numbers. So thanks to you both on this. I had a couple of questions, one of which I think may have already been answered earlier in the evening. We're not going to pay a penalty for bailing out on Cathedral City's contract. If we move forward, we can terminate that at any time and not have to worry about that. I was surprised, very pleasantly surprised, to see that the total cost still ends up saving us money in the long run, which is always good. Those upfront costs are a little scary considering everything that's going on, but using the development impact fees for the equipment and the state reimbursement, I think really makes that a much better pill to swallow. I'm still a little bit concerned with all of the potential changeover going on with between Erica and the county and the systems there, and I would hate to get us ahead of ourselves as much as this is needed to be done, but get ahead of ourselves and when we don't quite know which one of those systems we're going to be on. That being said, as the mayor mentioned and as you mentioned, Deputy Chief, this is something we need to do. We've all had endless resident complaints about dispatching and the issues we have with dispatchers being over in Cathedral City and not knowing our city, not caring about our city, not putting us at the head of the line, and this will solve that problem. So I'm looking forward to moving ahead on this. It gives me a little bit of a butterfly in my stomach, but I do think it's the best thing to do moving forward.
I think we can address.
Can I make a comment about PSEC and Erica? So I made sure that our console equipment is compatible with both Erica and PSEC. So the consoles we would purchase and the equipment we would purchase, it would not matter for the dispatch center which radio system we end up with. It would be compatible with both. The change that would happen is we would currently have to connect with Cathedral City because they have the backbone of the equipment. That connection would just have to be moved to PSEC. So, and some redirection of antennas. So the dispatch equipment will work with either system.
And that brought up one other quick question. Do you feel comfortable that we have the bandwidth capability from the telecom providers in the city to be able to affect that kind of a switch over here? Because our bandwidth infrastructure here in the city is lacking compared to several other cities.
So recently, the entire United States went through the rebanding process. I was the rebanding project manager for all of Erica. What we did, or what that consisted of, was taking all of the frequencies that we have for public safety, condensing them down to the first 0 to 120 frequency range, which means if we have radio towers or any of those towers, they cannot interfere with our frequencies there. And it's 800 megahertz frequency, which is a little bit different than what most other businesses and stuff use. So we've got dedicated space in the frequency ranges, which is the most powerful one. So it supersedes the other frequencies.
Well, not just that, as well as the telecom bandwidth infrastructure to be able to construct a dispatch center here. On the slide presentation, you were mentioning T1 lines, a couple of things like that. Are our telecom providers here in the city capable of giving us that at this point?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we've already checked the T1 line. We have a connection on our side and a connection at Cathedral City already that would just have to run the line.
Got it. Okay. Thank you very much.
Ms. Pye.
I have a question for the finance director. In the information you gave us, just above funding, I want to ask if with the 150,000, or we drop down to 10 years, is there a formula either way that we could use? I don't know how, but I'm trying to think of going forward where 105 makes sense today, but it may not make sense in 3-4 years. Is there a formula that we can use that would drop it down to 65? I think it's 65.
So what we would need to do is we would have to, something we've done before, we'd have to write up an interfund loan agreement. And what we can do with that loan agreement is just say, this $511,000 will be due to the general fund over however we can say, 15, 20 years if we'd like. You can say how many years, and we can start off with over 5 years and do a payment schedule over 5 years. But if we find in a couple of years that gets to be too much, we can recalculate the payment schedule and extend it out if we need to up to that 20 years of the loan agreement. So we have the flexibility there too. We just make the loan agreement out to say 20 years, start off the repayments at a 5-year. If that's too much, then we have the flexibility to recalculate that.
Thank you. And I'm done with you. Back to you two. We're asked to authorize this. No. To authorize the city manager to begin the process. I just want to make sure that we, on this side, where it comes in with the organization chart, that's not us. When it comes down to what you're going to pay the dispatcher, that's not us. That goes under what we're authorizing the city manager to do. I'm done.
And I appreciate that. I did, in the study, there is a few pages that show the organizational chart, and it's something myself and the chief have been looking at, but we just wanted to obviously share an idea with you of some options that we have. But I appreciate those comments.
I'm clear, but that's between you guys.
Mr. Griffith.
I have some comments first. Very happy with the idea. There has been a lot of, especially recently, feedback from people with experiences that were less than good in terms of the dispatch system that we're currently using. I can't say for sure. My personal feeling is I think that we are really kind of an afterthought and not deemed as, our calls are not deemed as important. So this is something that a lot of people have been wanting for a long time. I just want to clarify some stuff just so everybody is aware. When you talk about fully, was that fully burden rate, that is the total including benefits, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Question regarding reimbursement. We talk about the initial reimbursement. Will we be reimbursed by the county for any calls that emanate from the county since we kind of intermix here?
Not that I'm aware of. We go through how they would intermix is we go through the cell towers, and we have done a recent update on that. And you get certain sectors, that sector, we receive a phone call and it hits on the sector for Desert Hot Springs, it would go to Desert Hot Springs. You might have to transfer it if it's not yours because they hit on your section of the tower. I don't know if that quite answers your question, but that's how the calls are parsed out, or they're parsed out by, if you call from a landline, it goes to the department that you are associated with through the phone company.
So if you call from a landline in county territory, it actually goes to them and not us? Okay. So judging by, let's put the first year aside, because yeah, that's kind of an astronomical number, but based on what I looked at, we have no contract for 2022. So we would come in at probably a higher rate. If you stuck with the 3.65%, you're looking at that going up to $1,463,391 versus what we're looking at for us, which is $1,341,727. So that says to us a first year saving, according to this, if all goes to as planned, we're looking at $121,664. That seems like a pretty good savings to me. Does that kind of jive with what your calculations would be? Okay. I think it's a great idea. Yeah, there's going to be a big upfront cost, but it's like starting up a business. But I think the residents will definitely benefit because they're going to get actually dedicated, better service, better customer service with the Desert Hot Springs culture, as well as cost savings in the long term. So I'm definitely, this is a plus for me.
And I'll just go back to the one question you had. For the PSAP, there is that a part on that where we have to agree to get that buy-in from the state, that we do have to agree when 911 calls come in, if they aren't meant basically for Desert Hot Springs, that we push those out to the appropriate agencies. So that's why we wouldn't necessarily, number one, get any reimbursement for that, but also the mutual aid agreements that we have throughout the county with the other agencies. We go out and insist them on calls, same with us, and we don't look for a reimbursement for that. And then the last thing I like to, I think we talked about it, but one of the big things too is if Cathedral City decides to close up shop or decides that they don't want to renew our contract in 22, then there's nothing left for us. We've looked at Indio, and they're not interested in taking us on. Palm Springs and Riverside County Sheriffs are just way too expensive for that as an option.
Is there any reason why OES would not approve us?
No, I don't. Gail, do you?
I actually don't think there is any reason. Currently, the state would like agencies to consolidate. The Setna money, which is the funding that they give all the approved PSAPs to keep their equipment up, that's all coming from a 911 tax for your landlines. And we all know that currently people are using more cell phones than landlines. So the funding has been decreasing. They are working to get that changed to also charge cell phones to keep us, updated. So they would prefer that we consolidate. However, if you have a good enough reason to not consolidate, which I believe we do, I don't see a reason why we would not be approved.
Thank you. Mr. Betts.
Thank you. I don't think there's anybody in the public that's dealt with 911 service, since we've changed over, that's got to find this an unwelcome move. I know my calls to 911 have been exasperating. I think the very first day that this system was put in place with Cathedral City, a house up on a hill burned, and the response time was so long to get to there that just turned into almost near total loss just for the time the call got there. The other side of this, though, our job is to look at a cost benefit on this. And so along those lines, I have a few questions. And so I went through your study carefully, and let's get to the table of contents, and something struck me as curious, and it said realigned cell towers. What does that mean? And I didn't dig into that section specifically.
I can answer that without looking at this. It's what I was just talking about when we decide, okay, we are going to have our own dispatch center. We would realign all the cell towers around, and that means that they would go in and redirect the calls from cell phones at the cell tower to come to us rather than Cathedral City.
So realign doesn't mean pick up a cell tower and change its location?
No,
Okay.
no, it means go in and just adjust some software in there. This is conducted by the county coordinator. I've already talked to her. There's no charge to us. It's something that the county goes in and does. We just let them know right at the beginning when we've decided to do this so that they know it's coming, and they run a study on how they realign them. Is they run a study to see how many times you've transferred a call to another agency, and they'll adjust so that when they hit on that section, it goes to the correct agency. So that's something that's not going to cost us anything, but will cause these 911s from cell phones to come to our agency rather than Cathedral City.
Good. Okay, thank you. And then I've covered some of this with the city manager. We had to Cathedral City went over to a Mark III in allowance, and there's a different system that that the city manager had said was the one that we would really like to go with, but we've already committed to the Mark 43 system, so we're stuck with that. And I forget the name that he said. There's another system out there that's much better and preferred. But
if I may, it's Sunridge Systems.
Sunridge.
Yes.
So, but we don't have the opportunity to go with them now. Maybe in the future, when this equipment wears out 10 years down the road or something? Is that what we're looking at?
The software upgrade could be done once we're independent from Cathedral City. We have autonomy now over our dispatch, and we could choose whichever CAD RMS software we felt was the best use for the city. Is that correct?
We could. We're just kind of deep into it with Mark 43 right now, again, because Cathedral City went in that, so we started that process.
And there's no going back from Mark 43 now, because we need to use Cathedral City Dispatch until we would get the new center running.
Correct.
Okay. So getting into some of the numbers, you gave us some funding for use of diff fees for funding this. And I may have been reading this table wrong, but went over this in our meeting this morning. And it said that the percentage of fire calls was 12%, so we could only use 12% of the diff. And my math's correct, does that make it 88? The other side, thank you, journalism major, so hey, we'll take the math help. So and that 88 cents, but I'm looking at DHS PD reports taken versus fire reports taken, and maybe these calls don't match up. I'm just looking at the bottom two lines. But we had a whole lot. I don't know what a fire report taken means, but we had more fire reports taken in 2019 than we did police reports taken.
Those are Cathedral City Fire Department calls. So that's all medical and fire over there.
Okay, so where do I see the actual data in your study that correlates to what our finance director is giving us?
You actually don't see it in there. I've never been asked for that prior to this week.
Okay.
For the transfer calls. We never tracked those, how many calls we transferred before.
Okay, but I take it our finance director must have.
He asked me for the numbers, and I had them run how many were transferred from Cathedral City to CAL FIRE.
Okay,
So
so
that's
this,
where the numbers came
all
from.
right, so the significance on that is that we're looking for funding, and we've got an available fund balance in the fire of 729,000, but we're only using 97,000 of that. And we've got an available fund balance in the law enforcement diff of 597,577, and we got a startup allocation cost of 711,000. So we're coming up short. We've got a bunch extra in fire. So I'm saying if we could, you know, it wouldn't take too much to see what's the justification on the fire. I'm questioning the formula that was used, because obviously we need funding for this at the initial startup. That's the big cost here, is the startup. So I asked the city manager during my meeting with him this morning if they could look into that. Had you gotten anything back, Luke, on that?
Yes. To use diff funds in this manner, you have to have a justification that supports them. So right now, our supporting justification is the calculation done based on the calls from 2019. So we can't use that to argue that we can use more fire.
And I know it's anecdotal because, you know, I sit in downtown and I watch that fire truck go by all the time, and I'm not sure our police are screaming with their sirens like that fire truck is. But we got a really busy fire station. You're telling me our police department is 10 times busier than our fire department?
That's what the calls are showing to dispatch, which is what we are doing a study and funding. If we're going to bring a dispatch center to the city, that's the evidence that we can use to support use of those diff funds.
Okay, so I won't belabor the point here, but I would like to ask, and maybe we'll pick it up in ongoing conversations, that we drill down into that and find out, is it just all calls? And maybe some are minor calls and some are major calls, but we're basically talking about a 911 system. So I'd like to make sure that the point is, the more of the fire fund diff fees that we can use, the lower the amount of money we need to take from the general fund or other sources to cover this startup cost. And, you know, in reality, we're saving, I didn't pick up your number, but I came up with about $70,000, $71,000 a year in savings, ongoing savings. Once we switch over to this system versus the Cathedral City system, we're going to be spending about $71,000 less to operate this than what we're paying Cathedral City. Is that what you came up with? I came up with $121,000. All right, so we're not too far off. Okay, so it's not really a significant savings. And in private business, if you were going to go spend $1 million, whatever it is, $1.4 million on something, you would look for a better payoff than $70,000 a year in savings. So I don't think this is something that we're looking at getting a return on this. We're just trying to get better service for our residents, which gets me to my next question. What makes you think we can overcome the shortcomings that we've experienced with Cathedral City? Isn't it the same system? When you call Cathedral City, you ask them, you know, I've got a woman here, she's on the sidewalk, appears to be passed out and needs medical treatment. And at Cathedral City, they will say, well, I've got a list of questions I need to get to before I can dispatch anybody. And when you're answering all these questions, you're going, well, you know, it's got this woman here, she's having a heart attack, I don't know what's going on. But if you sent an ambulance, and they'll say, sir, you must answer these questions first. I was actually in that situation. I just walked down the street, found the paramedics happened to be sitting there, and they went and rendered aid. So the question is, and I think it's a right one that comes from the public who've looked at this, is what makes you think that, you know, the assumption is that we're going to do a better job? I see the city manager has showed up on the screen, so maybe he can answer that question. Aren't we just trading one dispatch system that's identical for another one and its protocols, and we're going to end up having the same issues?
We, if I can, Mr. Mayor, we actually will provide the philosophy, the direction and vision for our dispatch personnel. Like if you're looking in the big picture here and you're trying to sit back and say, okay, how is it going to be different? It's a regular socialization process that's necessary to happen from the time you hire that person through the entire 20 or 30 years that they may work in the system, as to what our expectations are and what we will allow and what we won't allow. And as we discussed earlier today, the dispatcher in most cities is maybe the only person that a community member will ever talk to with the city, and that person has to be an ambassador for the department. We've all discussed our frustration with the myriad of questions that are asked before a police car is dispatched or a fire truck is dispatched. I understand the reasoning behind why they do that, but when I was growing up as a police officer and I was new in the business, dispatch would get the basic information, and I'm talking very basic. Somebody would call on the phone and say, I've got a burglar at my front door. I've got somebody trying to break into my house. And they would immediately put out the call to officers, and they would update the information as we were responding. So it cut out the 4 or 5 minute delay in the questions that are being asked and the response of the police. So and I think the deputy chief and the chief and Gail will all agree that our philosophy from the very beginning is going to be customer service. It's going to be knowledge of the city. It's going to be response times. It's going to be improving the services that the department itself can as a whole, and also we're the ambassadorship of the ambassadors for the city. So I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, and I just wanted to hear that from you rather than, state that for myself. I think the public needs to hear it from you, that why we're doing this. I remember one time I'm calling to Cathedral City Dispatch and I say, hi, there's somebody who needs help at the corner of Palm and Pearson. Well, Cathedral City doesn't know where Palm and Pearson is. And I just said, look, just tell them Palm and Pearson. The local police know where it is. They'll get there. And she just would not accept that. I had to get on my reading glasses out of my car to go over and see an address off a building. So now the other question I have is, we're putting on 15 employees with this, correct? Approximately 10 full-time, 5 part-time as fill-in. And you've given us some projections on cost. Does that include the future impact to PERS?
It includes, it's fully burning according to numbers currently right now, not projected out.
Okay, well, we all know we don't fully burden PERS anywhere. So, so this is going to add to future PERS liability, which is a debit on the books, not a credit.
Well, let's keep in mind too, when we are charged by the city of Cathedral City, they don't leave out the fully burdened rate. So in other words, if their increases are 3.5% one year and there's a significant increase in PERS the following year, then they're going to make that difference up then. So we're going to be paying that minus the costs that are associated with their administration and so on and so forth.
Okay, so the last question I have, and a lot of these came in from the public, the questions that you satisfied in our meeting, I appreciate that, but I need to ask these for the benefit of the public, is we've got a relatively uncertain economy ahead. We don't know where we're going. We're very fortunate in this city that we haven't suffered the budget problems that other cities have. We don't know what's going to happen going ahead. That could change. If we commit to this today as a council and all of a sudden we find out, the thing we rely on most, the revenues that we rely on most all of a sudden aren't coming in, what's the ability of this council to say, hey, wait a minute, we need to back up here a little bit or hold off on this minute because we don't have the revenue for this startup cost? If you got a go or no go point for the council that you would come back and say, look, guys, we put this in motion, but all of a sudden something's changed. Now we got to change this, or is this just all, full steam ahead no matter what?
Honestly, if you give us the go ahead, we're going to go full steam ahead. Certainly if something came up, we would have to have the discussion, and then it would come really up to Cathedral City if they wanted to keep us on.
Can I say a couple of things here? The fact is that we would not have brought this to council if we did not feel that it wasn't ready for prime time. We feel that this is a budget neutral item. I know there's a significant upfront cost, but we have also been so conservative in our estimates for revenues over the last few years. Even this last year, we asked the city council to put aside $345,000 out of reserves, as we weren't sure if our revenues were going to come in as they should. And once again, we exceeded our expectations. So therefore, we did not have to utilize that money. We are well above what most cities are in their reserves. Most cities try to keep about 10% of the reserves. As you know, last year we finished up the year with a fund balance of about $1.7 million. And we anticipate, so far, our revenues are hitting the mark for the most part this year as well. And some of them are actually exceeding it again. So we think if there is a time, this is the time to do it. We have not entered into an additional contract with the city of Cathedral City. And we only have two options, us or them. And we feel at this point it's the best bang for our buck in the long run, as well as right now.
Okay, so just to wrap up my comments, I can remember going back to Chief Williams, Pat Williams, when he was here and asking him to look into some stuff. And he's, you know, he acknowledged back then there was problems with Cathedral City Dispatch. And I think every chief we've had is they've looked into specific instances of complaints from residents. Okay, I appreciate the answers to the questions, and I'm fine, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Ms. Pye, you had a question. I have a couple comments, and then we'll get to a vote.
Okay, I'm going to do this quickly. Part of what we're supposed to do is to ensure public safety. Oh, by the way, we got a savings. That's one of the reasons I asked the finance director if we can work with the 105 or the 65 in case something happened. Now, so far as I agree with Mr. Griffith, that, Mayor Pro Tem Griffith, that we have been served as a stepchild. And so far as dispatch is concerned, very simply, I had pizzas for the police department. I had to call dispatch. All I said, I have pizza. 15 minutes, somebody could have been on a very serious call. We don't need that. And this is what we are supposed to be doing. I'm done.
So I just wanted to give a couple comments. There was one comment made about fire services compared to police services, and being 20-year volunteer firemen, 95% of the time you hear a fire engine going because that's the way they roll to the calls. 95% of the time you don't hear police cars rolling to calls with code 3 in lights and sirens because they go to actually a lot more calls. I know Mr. Betts had a question about, is it really that big of a difference? Being with the volunteer fire department, for 20 years watching the police department roll calls, they rolled way more calls than the fire department did. But that's not saying that there isn't a percentage there that could be found. I know that we have a lot of comments about dispatchers, and I know this is a public meeting, and I want to first say thank you to all the dispatchers, because I know not all of them are in that same tone when Desert Hot Springs residents call. We've had a lot of good comments about getting the police and fire in the calls transferred. And you have to realize there's sometimes up to 3 dispatchers that you could be talking to. You could be talking to CHP, then to police, and then to fire. That has happened to me in the county area. What I want to say is that dispatchers are working 12-hour shifts. And if it's 11th hour and 59 minute, they might be up to their wits' end. We want to make sure that that doesn't happen with our department, as our city manager said, with policies and procedures, and to make sure that they're taken care of. We had a problem for a while there in our police department of a lot of overtime and a lot of people getting burned out because we couldn't get the qualified people. So I want to make sure before we start up, we don't start up with 5 of the 15. We make sure we're fully staffed, we got the qualified people, and that we're ready to go day one, so that we can give that customer service and set a standard for what we want to give our constituents. Because I know there's a lot of good dispatchers out there, but you can't expect a few dispatchers to do 15 people's job and work the overtime like we have had in the past. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir. And just to reiterate something, this is going to allow us control of dispatch. It's going to allow us to control our future. Right now, our future is up in the air. If Cathedral City decides they don't want us, we're going to be searching around, and it's going to end up costing us more. This just gives us the ability to control our costs. We're gonna, if costs start to go skyrocket, we cut back on salaries. This allows us the opportunity to control our costs in the long run. I think that's the biggest thing. The other thing that, and I'm sure Gail could talk about this, but Cathedral City dispatches Cathedral City Fire, both police departments, as well as medical, correct?
The fire and medical.
Our dispatchers are only going to be dispatching police, and we have 2. So the service will be better just because they're going to be focused on the police department. And having dispatch in there, if they start to get a call that's hot, all they have to do is yell through the station, hey, we need you to start responding this way. And that's going to make the calls that much faster.
And with the latest technology, I know that dispatchers are sending information out as the calls are going on. There's other dispatchers that can be dispatching units. It's the same as CAL FIRE's gone to triage dispatching, where they're actually somebody's on the phone trying to give you medical advice while someone else is dispatching the units. And I think we all need to realize that. And there's going to be issues. We've had those issues before. We believe this will be a better system. And as stated, the only concern I have is making sure that we're fully staffed day one, ready to go, so we don't start burning people out right away. All right, with that, I think there's enough comments. I think you guys have enough direction. I will entertain a motion.
I move for staff recommendation.
Second. Wait till they come up on the screen. No other comments seen, please vote.
Motion passes unanimously.
All right, item number 5 is the approval of the final map 37530, and this is going to be our Public Works Director, Mr. Porras. Thank you for hanging out with us. The Dodgers are up 8-1, so we're all calm. Right, Danny?
That's right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. This item is regarding final map 37530. The applicant, Dr. Duke Chang, would like to subdivide one lot into 2 lots. Approximately a 9-acre lot will be subdivided into one 6-acre lot and one 3-acre lot. Parcel map 37530 is located on the south side of Dillon between Little Morongo and Indian. Again, it's dividing one parcel lot into 2 parcels of 9 acres into 3 and 6 acres. On March 12, 2019, the Planning Commission approved tentative tract map 37530, subject to a number of conditions. The applicant has now met all the conditions and has submitted the final map for City Council approval and for recordation with Riverside County. The applicant is also dedicating street right-of-way. They are dedicating 15 feet along the south side of Dillon Road and 44 feet along the east side of Beers Road. These right-of-ways will be used for street and public utility purposes. A acceptance note is added to the final map to document this acceptance. The staff is recommending that council complete the following recommendations. 1, find the parcel map 37530 is in substantial conformance with the previously approved tentative map. 2, approve parcel map 37530 in accordance with the conditions of approval. 3, accept the dedication of easements offered on the map for street and public utility purposes. 4, authorize the city clerk and the city engineer to sign the map evidencing the city council's approval. And 5, authorize staff to process and file the map with the County of Riverside's Recorder's Office. That concludes my staff report. On the attachments, you'll see the parcel map, and you also have the 15 conditions that they have also met. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any public comment?
No, we do not.
All right, go to council member comments. Mr. Betts first, then Ms. Pye.
Okay, so I'm just looking at the map here, and well, I'm hoping we can. Beers Road is, you said this is between Little Morongo and Indian?
Yes.
And why does he want to subdivide this? Did he say?
I believe he wants to subdivide it to sell off one of the 2 parcels to do a commercial or industrial in the front and also the back.
Okay, and so I'm looking at Beers Road is the road that we are getting a right of way on?
Correct. 44 feet on the east side, east half of it with the knuckle towards the south end of it.
And how wide is a typical street, say like West Drive?
West Drive is actually, I believe, is between 80 and 100. West Drive is a more secondary road. A local road is about 60 feet. So this one's actually going to end up being 88 feet once it gets completed.
How do you get the easement from the other side of the?
When that property moves forward with development, they will be required to do that right away.
Okay, so when this person develops that road, probably when it goes to the planning commission for whatever development, they're going to say pave that road?
Correct.
And we're gonna have another half street in the city, right?
Correct, 44 foot wide, which would be a minimum is actually 30 feet, 12, and 4 feet shoulders.
Is there any way that we can prevent creating another half street? Maybe at this stage we can't. But we've got so many half streets in this city, and the legacy of those is that they go on for decades, and they're just a problem. So maybe that's beyond the scope of this right now. I would like on the maps, if we could have a vicinity map that would show me more than just the parcel map, so we could tell where this is. Maybe it's in there, I don't know, I didn't see it. But there's no way to tell where this is unless you actually go look up where Bierce Road is. I just don't think it'd be too much trouble to show even.
Sheet 2 of the attachment does have a vicinity map. It is very small. We could include one in the future ones.
Yeah, I don't see it there, but
It's in the top right corner of.
Oh, the top right corner of one of the maps?
We can
Yeah,
include
there you go.
For future big one.
It's pretty hard to see on the screen. If that could just be taken and printed as a separate sheet, it's not that big a deal, but at least it's a quick glance to where this is.
Yeah, we can do it in the future, of course.
I appreciate that. Can you see any reason why we wouldn't want to do this?
Not me, no. It's just a subdivision. If there's any future development, it still has to go through all the entitlement process, whether it's planning commission, city council, or a permitted use.
All right, well, I'm probably making way more of this than we need to at this point. Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Ms. Pye?
Councilmember Betts caused my question to be answered.
Thank you. Any other questions? Entertain a motion.
I'll move staff recommendation.
Whoops, I'll back out if you want.
Is there a second? Moved by Mr. Betts. Anyone want to second it? All right, please vote.
Councilmember Pye?
Shows she voted. Oh. What'd you vote?
I'm there.
Okay, motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. Future agenda items we discussed with the consent calendar was approved in whole. The future agenda items can be discussed with city manager's office. Is there any late public comments?
No.
All right. Before we adjourn, just a reminder that the November 3rd is the actual election day. And per our city calendar, the city council has canceled that meeting. A notice will be sent out. Will notice need to be sent out by the city clerk's office? Or that's part of our schedule, right?
Right, no notice will be sent out, but a notice will be posted.
All right, and then there's a planning commission meeting on the 10th, and we'll be back here, and a public safety commission on the 12th. We'll be back here on November 17th. With that, we are adjourned.